In the narrow service hallway of the Waldorf Astoria, Chicago, where dim yellow light brushed across cold marble walls, Zara Ellison leaned against the wall. Her heartbeat was pounding so hard it felt as though her chest could no longer hide it. Footsteps thudded from afar, mingling with the clang of silver trays against crystal glasses, forming a chaotic rhythm between glamour and shadow. She straightened her plain black uniform, a suit, hastily rented from an event staffing company. The fabric was coarse, the stitching cheap, but it was the perfect disguise for her. Beneath that outfit, no one would guess Zara was the only daughter of Adrian Ellison, the CEO behind Ellison Dynamics, a multi-billion-dollar empire. To the outside world, the Ellison princess was tucked away at Stanford, avoiding the noise. The truth was different. Zara lived another life under the name Zara Reed, working the most menial jobs to touch the ordinary breath of existence. She knew the cost of her name. Her mother had died in a mysterious accident, many called an assassination. 3 other times, before turning 18, Zara had narrowly escaped death, poisoning, kidnapping, and a car explosion. Those incidents turned her childhood into a long list of terrors. Her father built steel walls of security, transforming life into a cage. Yet here she was, disguised as staff, stepping back into that very world, the glamorous charity gala, hosted by Adrian Ellison himself. Through a crack in the door, Zara watched gowns glitter like a sea of jewels, tuxedos gleam, and smiles traded like currency. Every handshake was a contract. Every lifted glass of wine carried millions in promise. They coveted her place in this world, but she only wanted to escape it. The more she watched, the more bitter she felt. No one in that room truly understood the price of being born into wealth. A sudden voice behind her made Zara flinch. She turned and saw a tall man standing at the end of the corridor. His tuxedo was clearly expensive, though not quite of the upper echelon. His sandy brown hair was slightly tousled, and his green eyes shone with an unusual honesty in this world of facades. He smiled awkwardly. "I got lost, looking for the restroom, but I must have wandered backstage." Zara kept her voice calm. "This is the staff area. You shouldn't be here." He chuckled, warm and unguarded. "Story of my life, always getting lost." Then he extended his hand. "Ethan Cole. And you are?" She should have turned away, directed him back, and disappeared. But when her fingers touched his, the words escaped faster than reason. "Zara Reed." Oh, that false name, once just a mask, suddenly became the role she longed to inhabit. Ethan repeated it, his eyes bright with interest. "Zara Reed. Beautiful name, but not as beautiful as your eyes." Her cheeks burned. She had heard countless compliments over the years, but they were always laced with calculation. This time, his gaze held nothing but sincerity. He saw only a girl in a cheap uniform, nothing more. The echo of polished shoes from the main corridor made Zara freeze. Adrian's security team was patrolling. If they found her here, her disguise would unravel. Without thinking, she grabbed Ethan's hand. "Come with me, quickly." His hand was warm, calloused from real work. Unlike the manicured hands of the businessman she knew, she led him through the bustling kitchen, around the walk-in freezer, and stopped in a small corner near the service exit. Both were breathless. She realized he was still holding her hand. "Thank you," he whispered. But instead of letting go, he studied her, as though trying to solve a puzzle. "You're hiding too, aren't you?" The question pierced Zara's heart. She forced a laugh. "And what makes you think that?" "The way you walk, the way you keep scanning, like you belong here, but wish you'd never returned. And your voice, too polished, too educated for that uniform. My guess, private school." He smiled faintly. "I could be wrong, but my gut says otherwise." Zara's chest tightened. He was seeing through her mask closer than anyone had ever come. "You don't know anything about me," she protested. "Maybe not, but I know this." He squeezed her hand, his tone disarmingly sincere. "Meeting you is the most important thing that's ever happened to me. Tomorrow, just one coffee, somewhere ordinary. Let me understand you." Reason screamed at her to refuse. But 23 years in a gilded prison had left her starving for the simple. Her answer slipped out like a breath. "All right, tomorrow." Ethan's smile lit brighter than the chandeliers outside. He saved her number under the name Zara Reed. As they parted from the hallway, Zara felt the irregular pounding in her chest, the rhythm of hope. Late that night, when the gala ended, she returned quietly to the penthouse on Lakeshore Drive. The space was as dazzling as ever. Cloud, high glass ceilings, classical paintings, a cellar of rare wines. But in the mirror, for the first time in years, her eyes were not only wary. A new light flickered there, fragile, yet fierce. Tomorrow, at a small cafe in Wicker Park, she would meet Ethan Cole again. A man who knew nothing of Zara Ellison, a man who saw only Zara Reed. And from the moment she grasped his hand in the shadows, fate had already veered onto a path from which there was no return. The first morning after the gala, a small cafe on a corner in Wicker Park was crowded with commuters. The whir of coffee grinders, the clink of spoons against porcelain cups, and hurried laughter blended into the familiar soundtrack of Chicago mornings. In a quiet corner, Zara sat waiting with a cappuccino. She wore a simple white shirt, blue jeans, and natural hair. No one looking at her would think she was the daughter of a billionaire living atop a glass tower on Lakeshore Drive. Ethan arrived 10 minutes late, breathless from sprinting from the train station. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie stuffed in his pocket, his smile sheepish but sincere. "Sorry, got stuck on the train," he said. Zara looked at that smile and felt like someone had opened a door she thought had been locked forever. They sat together for 2 hours, talking about everything. The terrible movies he loved, the time she spilled a tray of beers on herself while waitressing, short trips, and old songs. No one mentioned money, the glass towers of Ellison Dynamics, and no one spoke Adrian Ellison's name. To Ethan, she was just Zara Reed, and to Zara, that was the most precious thing in the world. From one coffee, it became casual dinners at pizza joints. From conversations, it grew into hand, holding, first kisses under streetlights. Everything happened too quickly, almost recklessly. But in that recklessness, Zara found something she had never known: the freedom to choose love for herself. 3 weeks later, on the rooftop of Ethan's building in Logan Square, as the sunset painted the Chicago sky red, Ethan, trembling, proposed. No ring, no grand gesture, just a heart ablaze. "I can't imagine a single day without you," he whispered. Zara said yes before he could even finish. The wedding came swiftly, in a cramped courthouse office, with only a judge and 2 strangers off the street as witnesses. Zara wore a simple white dress. Ethan slipped a cheap silver ring, bought from a shop near the station, on her finger. Adrian Ellison did not appear, though Zara knew his security detail shadowed her every step. She saw Marcus Hale, the head of security, watching from afar with his icy stare. But for the first time, Zara refused to let fear devour her. She walked out of the courthouse hand in hand with Ethan, becoming Zara Cole. Their 1-bedroom apartment in Logan Square became a tiny paradise. The peeling walls, the splintered wooden floor, the cramped kitchen. Zara thought it was the most beautiful place on earth. They painted the walls together, sanded the floors, laughing as paint smeared their hair and faces. For Zara, every blister on her palms was proof of a real life not paved by her father's money. She often sat on the windowsill, watching sunsets over the red brick rooftops, listening to the traffic and thinking, "This is the life I longed for." 6 months passed, and their love deepened. Ethan wrapped his arms around her in the mornings as she brewed coffee, murmuring, "Good morning, wife." They ate instant noodles or frozen pizza at night, laughing at cheesy B-movies. They argued over dishes, then made peace with a kiss. Every simple moment made Zara feel like the luckiest woman alive. Around her neck hung a coffee cup pendant. Ethan had given her $10 from a street vendor. But to her, it was worth more than all the diamonds her father once forced her to wear at galas. The world of Zara Ellison still existed, but she locked the door to it. As Zara Cole, she applied for a job at a Chicago nonprofit providing scholarships for underprivileged children. The salary was modest, but she enthusiastically threw herself into the work. There, colleagues admired her for her talent, not for her last name or wealth. Each time she stood before children receiving scholarships, Zara felt she was giving back a piece of the fortune she had never asked for. One late afternoon, the director, Carla Ruiz, called her in. "Zara, I have good news," Carla said, eyes alight. "An anonymous donor just pledged $2 million to keep our program running for the next 5 years, and they specifically requested that you manage the grant. They said they'd read your proposals." Zara's smile trembled. She knew exactly who it was. Adrian Ellison. He would never approve of her marriage, but this was his way of showing love, quietly funding her so she'd never lack. Zara's chest tightened, torn between gratitude and guilt. Her father was still protecting her, even while believing she was destroying herself. That night, she and Ethan sat on their windowsill, eating cheap fried chicken and drinking red wine from the supermarket. Outside, the city glowed like an ocean of lights. Ethan rested his head on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You're doing something that really matters." Zara looked at him, overflowing with love, yet gripped by dread. He didn't know. He didn't think she could buy the whole building with a single phone call. He didn't see the truth looming behind them, ready to crash. That night, Ethan asked about her family again. He wanted to know where she came from, what had shaped the woman he loved. Zara repeated the fabricated story. Parents lost in an accident, raised by an aunt who left her a small inheritance. The lie was polished, smooth, convincing. Yet every time she told it, her heart sank. Ethan held her hand, eyes soft. "I wish I could have met them. They must have loved you as much as I do." Zara smiled, but later she lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling lit by street lamps, secrets piled on her chest like stones. Every day, every happy moment made her more afraid because she knew the truth, once shattered, would sweep everything away. She told herself love would be enough to shield her, though sometimes lies could serve as protection. But deep down, Zara knew, no lie could live forever. And one day, Ethan would realize he had married a woman who didn't exist. That afternoon, autumn sunlight poured gold over the streets of Logan Square. Zara and Ethan's tiny apartment was drenched in warm light. Zara sat on the bed, folding laundry Ethan's shirts mixed with her simple dresses, all smelling faintly of lavender soap. The scene was almost perfect. Ethan's old radio hummed soft jazz. The little kitchen still carried the scent of half-finished pastries, and the maples had already turned a blazing red outside the window. The doorbell rang at exactly 3:47 p.m., steady as a hammer strike. Zara wiped her hands on her jeans, assuming it was a delivery. But when she opened the door, she froze. Standing was a tall woman with platinum blonde hair in a tight bun, wearing a perfectly tailored black dress and gleaming stilettos. Her face was as sharp as a sculpture, her blue eyes sweeping over the hallway before fixing on Zara as though appraising merchandise. "You must be the wife," the woman said, her voice carrying a commanding timbre edged with steel, each word striking like a blade. Zara swallowed hard. "Yes, and you are?" "Margaret Cole, Ethan's mother." Without waiting for an invitation, she strode inside, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume that overwhelmed the small apartment. She glanced around, her gaze pausing on the battered furniture, the freshly painted but uneven walls, and she let her lips curl faintly. Charming, simple. The word simple landed like a subtle insult. Ethan emerged from the bathroom, still holding a wrench dripping water. "Mom? What are you doing here? Surprised?" She brushed a perfunctory kiss against his cheek without really touching. "I thought it was time I met the woman you call your wife." Ethan flustered, while Zara stood still, blood rushing in her ears. She knew this woman hadn't come out of love from the first instant. Margaret sat leisurely on the small wooden chair, crossing her legs like a queen temporarily claiming her throne. She looked Zara up and down, then smiled coolly. "So, what do you do for a living?" "I work at a non-profit, helping underprivileged children access education," Zara answered, steadying her voice. "Ah, noble. But I imagine it doesn't pay much. About $35,000 a year." Margaret nodded, eyes flicking toward her son. "Ethan, my darling boy, you could have chosen someone with a pedigree and a foundation for your future. Instead, you picked a girl who has nothing but kindness. She stressed the last word like a sneer. Mom, Ethan snapped lightly. That's enough. Zara bit her lip, wanting to argue but forcing herself to remain calm. Margaret wasn't here to connect. She was here to plant seeds of doubt. In the days that followed, Margaret appeared constantly. She invited them to dinner at the Langham, in a lavish, private room. That dinner was less a meal than a trial. Margaret sat beside her sister Elaine, Elaine's husband Thomas, and their 3 grown children. The entire table revolved around Zara. Margaret recounted how Ethan met Zara at the gala, deliberately phrasing it with mockery. So romantic. Ethan met her while she was carrying trays. The sidelong glances traded across the table made Zara feel like she was on display. And where's your family? Elaine asked sweetly, though curiosity glinted sharply in her eyes. I was orphaned at 18. Zara recited her polished lie. My aunt raised me, but she passed away. I have no relatives left. How tragic, Margaret cut in. So no one is alive to verify anything you say. No photos, no keepsakes. Nothing but a ghost. Ethan squeezed Zara's hand under the table. Enough, Mom. But Zara caught the flicker in his eyes' hesitation. Just for a moment, but enough to pierce her chest. After dinner, riding home in the taxi, Zara stared silently out the window at the streetlights streaking by. Ethan held her hand, but the grip was looser than usual. She knew Margaret had succeeded, planting a seed of doubt in her son's heart. And unless uprooted, that seed would grow into a tree of ruin. In the following weeks, Margaret's presence overshadowed their marriage. She dropped by unannounced, sitting in their tiny living room as if she owned it. She told Ethan stories from his childhood, rekindling fond memories, then contrasted them with Zara to highlight how unsuitable she was. She reminded him of her sacrifices, the debts she'd paid, the dreams she'd had for her son, and always she circled back to the refrain, "This woman will never be enough for you." Zara heard it all, her heart twisting. She knew the truth. She had more than anyone in that room could imagine. But precisely because of that, she couldn't fight back. Any word in her defense might rip down the curtain and expose her as Zara Ellison, the daughter of Adrian Ellison, a man who could crush the entire Cole family with a flick of his hand. Each night, as Ethan lay beside her, Zara heard his heavy breathing and knew he was wrestling with thoughts. Small questions began to emerge. Why she never contacted old friends, why there was no trace of her past, why she sometimes knew too much about subjects unusual for a poor orphan. Zara answered each question calmly, drawing on the discipline she'd honed since childhood. But inside, fear gnawed at her. Margaret wasn't just planting doubt, she was watering it, feeding it, and nurturing it daily. One night, after Margaret had left, Ethan sat on the sofa, a half-finished beer on the table. He spoke without meeting Zara's eyes. She worries about me. I know she goes too far, but sometimes I wonder, are you hiding something? Zara's throat locked. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell him about security walls, assassination attempts, her father the man Wall Street bowed to. But instead, she shook her head softly. I just want us to have a normal life. Ethan studied her for a long time, then nodded slowly. But the flicker of doubt remained in his gaze. That night, Zara lay awake in the dark, clutching the little coffee cup pendant at her throat. She knew what had begun was only the start. Margaret Cole didn't just want to step into their lives. She tried to shatter them. And Zara, with all her secrets, was fertile ground for destruction. October arrived, and cold winds threaded through Chicago's streets, scattering yellow leaves spinning under the feet of pedestrians. Zara tried to preserve a fragile flame of peace in their small Logan Square apartment with simple rituals, brewing cinnamon tea in the morning, laying a checkered cloth for dinner, and playing Ethan's favorite old jazz records. But that peace was like a thin cloth, always trembling under the draft that carried Margaret Cole's name. At first, they were only seemingly harmless questions. One evening, as Zara set a lunchbox on the table, Ethan hesitated. Hey, which high school did you attend? I just realized you've never told me. Zara froze, the spoon nearly slipping from her hand. She'd memorized her fabricated story. Public school in Iowa, moving often because her aunt kept changing jobs. She recited it like a machine, adding a forced smile. Ethan nodded, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. A few days later, while walking through Humboldt Park, Ethan suddenly asked, "Did you have a close friend as a teenager? Someone you still keep in touch with?" Zara stopped, looking down at the path covered in golden leaves. "No. When my aunt died, I left in a hurry. Everything was severed." Ethan stayed silent, but his handclasp loosened. Zara knew the source of these questions. Every afternoon, Margaret dropped by, and every phone call that lasted hours planted another seed. And now, those seeds had begun to sprout in Ethan's heart. One Thursday night, Ethan came home with a grave expression. He sat across from Zara at the dining table and placed a thin file on it. "Mom hired a private investigator," he said quietly, voice tinged with both shame and defensiveness. Zara felt her chest tighten like a vice. "Investigating? What?" Your past. They didn't find much. Your records only start at 18. Before that, almost nothing. No medical files, no schools, no official documents." Zara forced herself to remain calm. "I told you, records got lost. I moved around a lot, sometimes in the foster system." Ethan frowned. "But before, you said you lived with your aunt until she died. Now it's foster care?" The once smooth lie was beginning to crack. Zara's head spun. "My aunt was very sick. I was placed in foster care for a while. I didn't want to tell you because it hurts too much." "Hi." Ethan studied her closely, his gaze trying to pierce every layer. For the first time since they fell in love, his eyes held tenderness and interrogation. In the days that followed, the apartment's atmosphere grew heavy. Ethan still loved her, still wrapped his arms around her each morning. But within that embrace was an invisible gap, repeated questions, halting conversations like tiny cracks in tile, small but destined to spread. Margaret never stopped watering. One evening, when Zara came home from work, Margaret was already in the living room, sipping tea as if she owned the place. "You look tired," she said sweetly. "It must be hard to keep this pace when you're hiding so much." Zara went cold. "I'm not hiding anything." Margaret smiled, her eyes flashing triumph. "Then prove it. Show me a childhood photo, a letter from your aunt, anything. If not, I'm afraid Ethan will have to ask himself, who is his wife?" Zara said nothing, retreating into the kitchen. Margaret had struck the weakest point where Zara could never produce proof, because everything truly belonged to someone else. Zara Ellison, not Zara Cole. That night, lying beside Ethan, she heard him murmur in the dark, "I want to believe you, but you give me nothing to hold on to. You don't understand how many doubts Mom plants in my head." Tears soaked Zara's pillow. She turned her face away, whispering, "I'm just afraid of losing you." Ethan didn't respond. Only the clock ticked steadily, counting down the seconds until the secret shattered. A week later, matters grew worse. Ethan came home holding another file. "The investigator called one of your old jobs," he said hoarsely. "They said they never had an employee named Zara Reed." Zara went numb. This was surely a flaw in the network her father had built. But to Ethan, it was irrefutable evidence. He looked at her, his eyes red. "Who are you?" She opened her mouth, wanting to explain, to scream that she was Zara Ellison, daughter of one of the most powerful men in America, that her whole life had been running from enemies, and that loving him was the first time she'd ever felt like a real person. But the words lodged in her throat. She couldn't say them. Not now. Ethan dropped the file on the table and stood, his hands trembling. "I told Mom to stop interfering. I told her you were different. But now, you've given me reason to doubt." Zara sat motionless, feeling the world collapse around her. That night, Ethan didn't lie beside her. He slept on the sofa, back turned, shoulders shaking now and then. Zara sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cold space next to her, knowing their love had cracked, and her mother-in-law had succeeded in planting the seed of doubt. That seed had taken root, and someday soon, it would grow into a tree, casting darkness over their entire lives. Saturday, The air in Chicago carried a crisp chill. Zara stood in the small bathroom of their Logan Square apartment, the pale yellow glow of the neon light reflecting a face gone ashen. She slipped into a simple black dress, modest, not ostentatious, yet formal enough. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted it in front of the mirror. Deep down, she knew, tonight would not be a family dinner. Tonight would be a trial. Outside the door, Ethan fastened his tie. He looked at her with an expression she barely recognized, no longer the tender gaze of a devoted husband, but more like a man preparing to place his wife under the spotlight, to test her truth. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Zara forced a brittle smile. "If I don't go, doesn't that only prove your mother right?" Ethan fell silent, and in that silence was an answer sharper than any words. Zara felt her heart constrict. At Alinea, the renowned restaurant in downtown Chicago, lights glittered brilliantly. A waiter escorted them to a private room on the second floor, where Margaret Cole already waited with her sister Elaine, Elaine's husband Thomas, and their 3 grown children. The air was taut as a tightened string. Zara inhaled deeply and stepped in like an actress walking onto a stage. "Here they are," Margaret's voice rang out, all false warmth. "Zara, sit beside Ethan, so everyone can see how happy you two are together." Her smile cut like ice. Zara sat, her palms damp with sweat. The meal began with exquisite dishes, but every bite was poisoned by Margaret's words, deftly delivered like knives. "So fascinating," Margaret said, lifting her glass of wine. "Ethan met Zara while she was serving drinks at a charity gala. It's rare that such cross-class romances actually reach marriage." Elaine smiled thinly. "Ah, romantic, isn't it?" But her eyes gleamed with scrutiny. Zara steadied herself, repeating that she'd worked for a non-profit. But Margaret was relentless. "Only as temporary staff, wasn't it? Not exactly core involvement. Admirable enough, I suppose." Soft chuckles rippled around the table. Zara felt heat rush to her cheeks, but swallowed it down. By the main course, Margaret changed direction. "Zara, why don't you tell us about your family? Ethan says you've been an orphan since you were 18. How tragic." Zara repeated her polished story. An aunt who raised her passed away early, leaving no other relatives. Margaret sighed with mock pity. Such a shame, but odd, that someone would have no photos of her parents, no keepsakes, nothing, as if they never existed. Eyes turned towards Zara, half pity, half suspicion. Beneath the table, Ethan's hand clasped hers, but weakly, without conviction. Zara wiped her tears, answering softly, "Everyone copes with loss differently. I chose to carry memories in my heart." Margaret tilted her head, smirking. "Memories are easy to shape. Documents, mementos, proof, those are harder to fake." The air froze. Zara could hear her own heartbeat hammering in her ears. Then Margaret struck the decisive blow. "I hear you two recently received a substantial deposit. You said it came from your late aunt's inheritance, right? Interesting, because I know someone at the county clerk's office. They found no record of such an aunt. It's as if she never existed." Ethan's fork and knife clattered against the plate. He turned to Zara, eyes wide. "Zara, is that true?" Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Every gaze around the table bore down like a jury already convinced. She felt naked, stripped of every shield. At last, she whispered, I don't know why there are no records. I only know I received the money." Margaret sipped her wine, lips curving in a faint victorious arc. "So mysterious. It's difficult to trust when every story has holes." The silence that followed was heavier than any spoken word. Zara sat there, surrounded by crystal glasses and glittering chandeliers, yet it felt like she was bound in the center of a public tribunal. When dessert arrived, she could endure no more. Her chair scraped harshly against the marble floor as she rose. "Excuse me," she murmured, her voice breaking. "I need some air." She left the room, hurrying down the staircase, past the restaurant's main hall, where a few curious diners turned their heads. The cold wind slapped her face out on the street, but it was kinder than the suffocating air inside. Minutes later, Ethan rushed after her. "Zara," He grabbed her shoulders, his eyes pained and bewildered. "Tell me, is everything my mother said true?" Zara met his gaze, her throat locked tight. She wanted to scream the truth, to explain that all of it was a shield against danger, that her love had never been a lie. But the words stayed trapped, heavy as lead. Ethan shook his head and let her go. "I don't know what to believe anymore." That sentence cut deeper than any blade. 2 weeks after the humiliating dinner, the Logan Square apartment no longer resembled a home. The warmth that once wrapped the small space had thickened into airless tension, like a room sealed with no windows. Each morning, Zara awoke to silence. Ethan usually left early, leaving scraps of paper on the kitchen counter with hurried scrawls. "Working late. Don't wait up." Each note was another cut, turning once, fulfilling love into fractured pieces of distance. Zara tried to hold on to normalcy through her work at the non-profit. She found slivers of meaning there, preparing lessons for underprivileged children, coordinating volunteers, and listening to families' stories. In the old office on the 3rd floor of a red brick building, she could feel like Zara Cole, not the Ellison trapped behind golden bars. But Margaret's shadow appeared there too, even without her ever stepping inside. Zara's director, Janet, called her into the office one afternoon. Janet's face, usually gentle, was shadowed with concern. "Zara, I got a strange call this morning. They said they were doing a background check for a company you'd applied to, but I don't recall you ever mentioning plans to leave us." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. "No, I never applied anywhere else. They asked many questions about your finances, education, history, even whether you'd ever been tied to some scandal." Janet paused, eyes searching hers. "Is there something I should know?" Zara bit her lip, forcing a shaky smile. "No, nothing at all. Someone must have made a mistake." Janet nodded, though unease lingered on her face. "I believe you. But Zara, sometimes rumors, even false ones, can do real damage." Zara left the office with her legs heavy, like trudging through mud. She knew the culprit, Margaret. Without a doubt, the woman was dragging the war outside the family. In the days that followed, it worsened. A colleague mentioned someone had asked whether Zara had ever misused funds. A parent in the program sent her a private message. They'd received an anonymous warning claiming Zara was untrustworthy. The poison was spreading. When Zara came home that evening, Margaret was sitting in the living room. She wore an elegant grey dress, sipping Earl Grey like she owned the place. Ethan sat across from her, his shoulders slumped in exhaustion. "Hello, dear," Margaret said sweetly. "I think it's time we had an honest talk, just between mother and daughter-in-law." Zara set her bag down, heart hammering. "You don't have the right just to walk in here." Margaret shrugged. "Ethan gave me a key. Family, you know." Ethan lifted his gaze, avoiding hers. "I just thought it might make Mom feel closer." Zara's throat tightened. Rage rose, but she forced it down. "What do you want?" Margaret set her cup down deliberately. "I want you to leave Ethan. The sooner, the better." Ethan shot to his feet. "Mother, son, listen to me," she said firmly, eyes sharp. "This woman is destroying you. You're sleepless, distracted, and your work is suffering. And her non-profit? There are rumors of embezzlement already. Everything around Zara reeks of scandal." "That's not true," Zara burst out, her voice trembling. "You're fabricating everything." Margaret's gaze sliced through her. "Then prove it. Show me one document and one witness from your past. If you can't, I'll keep going. And believe me, I know exactly how to make this city turn its back on you." Zara's palms went cold. Margaret didn't shout, didn't bluster. Every word was a knife sinking deeper. Ethan stepped between them. "Enough, Mother. I love Zara, but you're right about one thing." He turned to his wife, eyes clouded with turmoil. "Zara, I need the truth. You can't keep silent forever. If you do, she wins." "Ha." The sentence landed like an axe. Zara nodded faintly, tears spilling, and retreated into the bedroom, locking the door. Behind it, she could still hear Margaret's serpentine whisper to her son, "See? She'll never dare face the truth." In the dark, Zara curled on the bed, clutching the little coffee cup pendant Ethan had once given her. For all her years of hiding, she had never felt fear like this, not from enemies outside, but from the enemy seated comfortably in her living room, smiling at her son. In the following days, Ethan's suspicion widened into cracks. His questions grew sharper, his voice harsher. Why does no one know you before 18? Why is there no record of that inheritance? Why are your co-workers hearing the same rumors? Zara fought to answer, but every explanation only fueled the flames. She spoke of loss and loneliness, but Ethan shook his head, despair flooding his eyes. One Thursday evening, Zara came home to find Ethan on the sofa, holding a yellow envelope. His eyes were bloodshot. "Mom gave me this. A photo of you leaving Ellison Dynamics. With a man in a suit." "Zara, explain." Her breath stopped. She recognized it instantly, not her, but an actress hired. She knew Margaret's tactics too well, but to Ethan, the image was damning. "It's not me," she whispered. "Someone's trying to frame me." Ethan hurled the envelope onto the table. "It's always someone, always an excuse, but never the truth." He grabbed his coat. "I need space to think." The door slammed shut, leaving Zara alone in the apartment. Margaret's last words seemed to linger in the air. "Believe me, I know how to make this city turn its back on her." Zara collapsed to the floor, shattered. The poison had seeped into her work and the heart of the man she loved, and she knew it would kill their marriage if she didn't act soon. Tuesday morning, Chicago was draped in a heavy grey fog, with fine drizzle clinging to the apartment windows. Zara sat at the kitchen table, both hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee. Ethan hadn't come home last night. Her messages showed as "read," but he never replied. Her heart felt plunged into ice. At precisely 10 a.m., a knock rattled the door. Zara startled, her chest tightening. She opened it, unsurprised to see Margaret standing there, her silver-blonde hair perfectly pinned, beige trench coat immaculate, umbrella in hand, as if she'd stepped out of an advertisement. "Is Ethan here?" Margaret asked sweetly, though her eyes searched Zara like scalpels. "No, and you're not allowed to show up anymore," Zara replied, her voice trembling but firm. Margaret smiled and swept past her without waiting for permission. "Oh, I just want to ensure my son isn't trapped in a web of lies." Zara slammed the door and spun around. "You're destroying my marriage." "No, dear." Margaret set down her umbrella, peeled off her gloves, and strolled forward. "I'm only exposing a truth my son has been too blind to see, and tonight he will decide for himself." Zara's voice shook. "What do you mean?" Margaret tilted her head, her smile sharp as glass. "We're going to talk, the three of us, tonight." "Oh." That evening, Ethan returned home, face haggard. He dropped onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands. "Mom wants to meet with us. Here. I don't have the strength to dodge anymore, Zara. Everything has to come out." Zara's knees buckled beneath her. She wanted to refuse, to scream, but his eyes, tired, doubtful, pleading, forced her to nod. Soon after, Margaret arrived carrying a thick folder. She settled into the chair opposite, laying the papers on the table like a prosecutor ready to deliver charges. "Here," she said calmly, "is everything I've found. Proof that Zara Cole is not who she claims to be." Ethan's hands shook as he opened the file. Inside were bank statements with large deposits, grainy photos of a young woman leaving Ellison Dynamics headquarters, and investigative notes outlining holes in Zara's history. She knew most of it was twisted or fabricated, but to anyone unaware of the truth, they looked like nails sealing a coffin. "Explain," Ethan rasped. Zara drew in a breath. This might be her last chance. "Ethan, what you're seeing isn't the whole story. There are things I can't tell you, not because I don't trust you, but because I want to protect you." "Protect me?" Ethan gave a bitter laugh. "By turning yourself into a mystery? Forcing me to hire investigators? Making every part of your life a question mark? Protect me with lies?" Margaret remained still, eyes gleaming like a predator watching its prey stumble into the trap. Zara reached for Ethan's hand. "I love you. Everything we've shared is real. Every moment. The nights we laughed, the arguments and reconciliations. Only my past is hidden. Please, don't let your mother destroy us. Nas. Ethan pulled his hand away, his gaze torn between love and suspicion. I want to believe you, but every time I ask, you stay silent or spin another story. I'm exhausted, Zara. Exhausted from not knowing who the woman I married really island. Tears blurred her vision. I can't tell you, Ethan. If I do, you'll be dragged into danger. Margaret's voice slid in, smooth as silk laced with poison. See, Ethan? She never answers. It's always, I can't. That's how a fraud keeps her game alive. End of foof. Shut up, Zara screamed, her voice breaking. You know nothing about me. Margaret rose, stepping closer. Oh, I know enough to see you're nothing but an illusion, and my son deserves the truth. The air grew suffocating. Ethan gripped the file, his eyes bloodshot. God, Zara, you're driving me insane. Just say who you really are. I can't, she whispered. The fragile thread finally snapped. Then Mom was right all along. Everything is a lie, Ethan roared, springing to his feet. In blind fury, his hand lashed out. The slap cracked through the room, sharp and merciless. Zara's cheek flamed with heat. Her head snapped to the side, vision blurring with tears. Silence slammed down like a coffin lid. Margaret exhaled softly, the corners of her mouth trembling upward the moment she had long awaited. Zara clutched her cheek, her whole body trembling. She stared at Ethan, the man who once held her through bitter winter nights, now standing there, his hand still quivering from the strike. His face was pale, eyes wide with horror at what he'd done. Zara, he stammered, voice cracking. I didn't mean... But she stepped back, tears streaming. You already did. The door burst open. Heavy footsteps echoed. Adrian Ellison strode in, tall in a slate-grey suit, two black-clad security men behind him. His eyes swept the scene, his daughter clutching her face, her husband with a trembling hand, Margaret Cole with a triumphant smile. The silence was so thick that even the patter of rain against the window was deafening. Adrian's voice rumbled low, commanding, resonant. Enough. The Logan Square apartment, once familiar to Zara for its peaceful evenings and bursts of laughter, had transformed into a makeshift courtroom. Yellow lamplight cast three silhouettes on the wall. Zara clutching her cheek, Ethan frozen in shock, and Margaret sitting ramrod straight, lips curved like someone savoring victory. Adrian Ellison entered, carrying a presence that shrank the entire room. His slate-grey tailored suit, neatly combed salt and pepper hair, and steely gaze cut across each person like a sharpened blade. Two bodyguards closed the door behind him, sealing the space in suffocating tension. My daughter has been struck, Adrian said slowly, his voice low yet resounding. In her own home. Ethan swallowed hard, his hand still trembling. Mr. Ellison, I lost control. There are no buts. Adrian cut him off, stepping towards Zara. He laid a hand gently on her shoulder, his eyes softening for the briefest moment. Zara, are you all right? Zara nodded weakly, though tears still stained her cheek. I'm fine, Papa. Adrian turned back, his face instantly regaining its icy edge. Ethan Cole, he said the name with no trace of respect. Do you know who I am? Ethan bowed his head. Yes, sir. I know. You also know I could erase your life with a single phone call. Margaret jumped in, scrambling to regain control. Mr. Ellison, let's not be dramatic. Ethan only. Lashed out because of deceit. Your daughter has hidden. Adrian's head snapped toward her, his eyes flashing with danger. Open your mouth one more time, and my men will escort you out and ensure you never set foot in another building in Chicago where I have influence. And trust me, that's every building. Margaret froze, though her thin smile lingered. She stepped back, realizing this was no longer her arena. Adrian picked up the folder Margaret had brought, flipping through each page. I've reviewed this nonsense. You paid a bargain bin private investigator, fabricated evidence with doctored photos, and bribed documents. That picture outside Ellison Dynamics. An actress. I have her contract. He flung the file onto the table, papers scattering like dead leaves. This is not the truth. This is a conspiracy. Ethan lifted his eyes, red-rimmed. But why? Why has Zara never told me the truth? Why is everything a secret? Adrian stepped closer, his gaze piercing. Do you know what my daughter has lived through since childhood? At 7, she had to take antidotes because someone had poisoned her food. At 14, she narrowly escaped a kidnapping outside her school gates. At 17, she nearly died from a bomb planted under her car. Do you understand now why Zara hides? Because the truth could kill you. Ethan staggered back, his face paling. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, Adrian replied coldly. Because Zara chose to let you live a normal life instead of dragging you into a world of blood and money. Zara gently grasped her father's hand, her voice trembling. Papa, enough. I don't want him more afraid. Adrian squeezed her hand, then leveled his gaze at Ethan. You had everything. A wife who loved you for who you are, who gave up fortune and power, and what did you do? You believed your mother's lies and struck her. Ethan shook his head, tears spilling. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Zara. I didn't mean to. But Zara turned her face away, clutching her chest as if holding her heart together. That apology could never erase the moment his hand fell. Margaret's soft laugh sliced through the silence. Please, Ethan is only human. Any man deceived for months would react the same. Adrian's eyes flared like fire. You admitted you orchestrated this and then excused your son's violence. Disgraceful. He gestured to his guards. Remove her. Now. You can't, Margaret shrieked, but 2 strong arms gripped her, dragging her out. Her heels clattered against the wooden floor, leaving behind only the faint stain of Chanel perfume like a scar. The door slammed shut. Adrian fixed his gaze on Ethan one last time. Do you love Zara? Ethan nodded fiercely. Yes. More than myself. Then prove it. Adrian's voice was steel. I don't need words. I need action. I'll give you one final chance 1 year. If you prove strong enough to protect this family not with fists, but with integrity, I'll allow you back in that year. If not, he squeezed his daughter's shoulder, then Zara will never have to relive this pain again. Ethan collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands, sobbing. Zara looked at him, her heart torn between love and betrayal. Adrian helped her up, whispering, You've suffered enough. Now let Papa handle it. Zara turned once more, seeing Ethan mouthing her name through sobs, but she walked away, hand in hand with her father, leaving behind the apartment that once sheltered her. Outside, the rain poured harder, washing away falsehoods. But the pain remained, and that slap carved a line that could never be erased. That night, Zara sat in her father's limousine, her hand still pressed against her flushed cheek. Chicago swept past the window like a blur of dim lights. She felt as though she had lost a piece of her soul. Ethan, the man she had believed would protect her with his very life, had betrayed her with his own hand. Adrian sat beside her in silence. But his silence wasn't empty. It was dense, weighted with the force of a man calculating each move to restore justice for his daughter. Papa, Zara whispered, please don't eradicate Ethan. Her voice caught. I still love him even though. Adrian turned toward her, his gaze softening for a fleeting moment. My daughter, I do not punish love. I punish the one who poisoned that love and turned it into a weapon against you. And that person is Margaret Cole. The next morning, news rippled through Chicago's financial circles. The law firm that once represented Margaret Cole abruptly severed ties. A bank announced her accounts were frozen due to an internal investigation. On social media, anonymous exposés revealed gambling debts she had hidden in Las Vegas. Zara stared at the headlines flashing across her phone, her heart pounding. Papa, you did all this? Adrian sipped his coffee inside a glass-walled conference room on the 60th floor of Ellison Tower, his eyes gleaming like steel. I only lifted the curtain. What she concealed, I let the light expose. That is not revenge. That is the truth. Zara fell silent. She knew her father wasn't exaggerating. Adrian's power didn't lie in fabricating lies, but in unearthing the secrets others would die to keep buried. Margaret Cole refused to sit quietly. 3 days later, she convened a press conference at a luxury hotel on the Magnificent Mile. Zara and Adrian watched the live stream on a large screen in the conference room. Margaret stepped to the podium, her silver blonde hair gleaming, her smile composed. "I am merely a mother concerned for her son," she began. "I discovered that my daughter-in-law concealed her true identity, lived under an alias, and received questionable funds. I only want the truth." Reporters stirred. She presented a few photos and old records, things Adrian knew were forgeries. But to those unaware, they seemed plausible. Zara's hand trembled. "They'll believe her, Papa. They'll think I'm a fraud." Adrian placed his hand on her shoulder, his voice low and steady. "Wait, let the storm fall on the right head." As Margaret prepared to conclude, another cluster of journalists surged forward, holding a thick dossier. "Mrs. Cole, how do you explain this evidence?" Cameras zoomed in. Records of gambling debts in Las Vegas, emails between Margaret and a private investigator, even a video of her handing an envelope of cash to an actress. This very woman had posed as Zara in the fake photo. Chaos erupted. Margaret froze, her smile shattering. This is fabricated," she shouted. But a reporter yelled back, "These documents came from the FBI. They confirm you are under investigation for fraud and bribery." Zara exhaled sharply, tears streaking her face. "Papa, you." Adrian only nodded, his eyes fixed on the screen. "I told you, a father's wrath needs no weapons, only the truth." That afternoon, Margaret was escorted from the hotel and placed in federal custody. Headlines blurred. High society matriarch, arrested for fraud and corruption. Margaret Cole. From powerful mother to disgraced deceiver. At his office, Ethan saw the news and collapsed onto his desk. He dialed Zara dozens of times, but she never picked up. That night, Adrian found his daughter on the penthouse balcony. Wind off Lake Michigan whipped around her, yet she stood motionless, eyes fixed on the distance. "You've protected me, Papa," she whispered. "But why don't I feel relief? Why do I feel hollow?" Adrian wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Because you still love him. But love is not enough without trust. You may forgive, but you can never forget." Zara leaned against his shoulder, her heart heavy. She knew he was right. That slap had cut deeper than flesh. It had carved a fracture in her heart that could never fully mend. Adrian gazed toward the horizon, his eyes burning in the dark. "Margaret Cole has faced her reckoning. But Ethan—" He paused, his voice sinking low. "If he wants to win you back, he must prove his worth. Not with words, but with his entire life." Zara stayed quiet, torn between fear and a fragile thread of hope. Across the city, Ethan sat alone in his hollow apartment, the television flashing images of his mother being led away in handcuffs. In the shadows, he whispered, "Zara, I'll do whatever it takes to have you back." Chicago glowed under the nightlights. Glass towers reflected the brilliance like massive torches stretching toward the sky. On the top floor of Ellison Tower, Adrian Ellison sat in his lavish office, though his mind wasn't on financial reports or multi-million-dollar deals. Across from him stood Ethan Cole, gaunt, hollow-eyed, dark circles carved from nights without sleep. In the corner, Zara sat silently. She hadn't wanted to be here, but Adrian insisted. He wanted his daughter to witness with her own eyes that this father would never let her suffer again. Ethan stood tall, fists clenched. "Mr. Ellison, I didn't come to justify myself. I was wrong. I let doubt and my mother's manipulation turn me into someone I don't recognize. I only ask for one chance. One chance to prove that my love for Zara is real." Adrian leaned back, arms crossed. "Love? Empty words don't restore broken trust. They don't erase the red mark on my daughter's cheek. But," he paused, eyes gleaming like steel, "I believe in trials. If you want to prove yourself, I'll give you the chance. But the path will have no shortcuts." Ethan lifted his head, voice raw. "I accept, whatever it takes." Adrian rose, walking to the floor to ceiling windows overlooking the city. 1 year. You have 1 year to rebuild everything from nothing. You may not use the Ellison name, nor lean on any privilege. You must create a life strong enough to support a family, not to rival me in wealth, but enough for me to believe you can shield Zara from the storms of life. Ethan froze. For most men, a year was far too short to build a life, let alone win the trust of a dynasty like Ellison's. Yet a spark flickered in his eyes. "I'll do it." For the first time, Zara spoke, her voice trembling. "Papa, is this fair? A year. He isn't you. He doesn't have your power." Adrian turned, gaze softening slightly at his daughter. "Child, love cannot survive without stability. I don't need Ethan to become me. I need him to prove he's not a weak man shackled by his mother's strings. You want a home, not a cage." Zara fell silent, hands knotted, heart torn in two. Ethan stepped closer, voice resolute. "I'll start from scratch. If I fail, I'll walk away and never trouble Zara again. But if I succeed," he turned toward her, eyes brimming with devotion, "I'll come back to beg you for another chance." "No." Zara's eyes glistened. She couldn't nod, couldn't shake her head, only silence. Adrian inclined his head. "Then it's settled. 1 year, starting tomorrow. If you fall, don't expect me to pull you up." The months that followed were unlike anything Ethan had imagined. He left his old apartment, renting a tiny suburban room with little savings. His job at the advertising firm was gone, tainted by his mother's scandal. He took a position at a small startup, accepting a fraction of his former salary. By day, he crafted marketing campaigns. By night, he studied coding, preparing to launch his own company. Whenever exhaustion crushed him, he remembered Zara's eyes the night she walked away, eyes that held both pain and waiting. That memory fueled his every breath. Meanwhile, Zara continued her work at the non-profit. She followed Ethan's progress only through whispers in business journals, short blurbs about a scrappy startup he was part of. Her chest tightened each time she saw his name, but she never reached out. Adrian was right. If Ethan couldn't stand alone, everything would crumble again. 6 months passed. Ethan launched his own small agency focused on communications for non-profits and local businesses. He worked tirelessly, some nights sleeping on the office couch. Young colleagues trusted him, calling him the madman who believes in dreams. One evening, just as he sealed a contract with a small university, his phone buzzed with a message. 6 months. You're halfway. Don't think I'm watching. A.E. Ethan gripped the phone, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. Adrian still observed, and the cold judge was on high. But to Ethan, it was fuel. By month 12, his once tiny firm had grown to 10 employees, securing a significant contract with a national healthcare organization. Revenue covered payroll and more, proof that Ethan was no longer a man living off someone else's name. Dressed in a crisp suit, he walked into Ellison Tower, the same place where he had begged for a chance a year ago. His steps still trembled, but his eyes were steady now. Adrian waited in his glass-walled office, Zara sitting quietly behind him. Ethan set a thick folder on the desk, financial reports, contracts, and client testimonials. "Mr. Ellison," Ethan said firmly, "I've done it. 1 year from nothing. Here is the proof." Adrian leafed through the pages, face unreadable. At last, he set the file down, raising his gaze. "Good. You accomplished what few would dare attempt. But the final question remains, why did you do all this? For honor, to prove yourself to me, or for Zara?" Ethan turned, locking eyes with her. "For you. Only for you. Without you, everything I've built is meaningless." Silence swallowed the room. Zara trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks. Adrian crossed his arms, leaning back. "I've seen enough. The choice now belongs to my daughter." Every gaze turned to Zara. She inhaled deeply, her heart pounding. That slap still lingered in memory, but so did a year of Ethan's transformation. Every step, every drop of sweat, every sleepless night. She stepped forward, facing him. "You've proven you're strong. But love needs more than strength, it needs forgiveness. I need time. But if I open my heart, are you ready to start again, with no more lies between us?" Ethan clasped her hand, eyes bright with desperate hope. "I'm ready, always." Adrian rose, his gaze stern yet softened at the edges. "Then I will step back. But hear me, Ethan Cole. If my daughter sheds tears because of you again, There will be no second chances. Zara squeezed Ethan's hand. She let herself believe love could live again for the first time in a year. A year after that fateful meeting at Ellison Tower, Chicago shifted seasons again. Snow blanketed the streets, yet in a small apartment near Lake Michigan, warmth bloomed in laughter from two people who once thought they'd lost each other forever. Zara flipped pancakes, the smell of coffee filling the air. Around her neck hung the little coffee cup pendant Ethan had given her long ago, shining brighter than any diamond. Ethan emerged from the bedroom, hair tousled, carrying two new wooden chairs to replace the old ones. He had learned to rebuild everything, not just his career, but himself. "I did it," he grinned, setting the chairs down. "We can start again, with the little things." Zara smiled, eyes shimmering. "I don't need castles. I only need truth. And you, now." Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. The scent of coffee mingled with his warmth, and the outside world melted away. They were no longer the heiress hiding her name, and the man haunted by lies. They were two people in love, learning to forgive and grow through their scars. Adrian Ellison gazed over the city from his penthouse, finally at peace. He had stepped back, letting his daughter choose. And she had chosen not perfection, but a man who could rise again after falling. The storm had passed. The scars remained, but from them bloomed flowers, flowers of trust and hope. Because love, once it has endured the harshest trial, is no longer fragile. It becomes a shelter, one no tempest can tear down. True love is not the absence of mistakes, but the courage to mend them. And Zara and Ethan had learned that love can become eternal only with honesty and patience to forgive.